Struggling cowboy found female Seminole Outcast tied to a tree. The sign said, "The whites call it." The sun was sinking behind the distant ridges, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple. Ethan Crow wiped the sweat from his brow and let out a low whistle. The land around him stretched wide and wild, with tall grasses that whispered in the wind and jagged rocks that jutted out like broken teeth. This part of the frontier was harsh. Water was scarce, the sun burned hot by day, and nights brought a chill that cut through even the thickest coat. Ethan had been riding for hours. His horse, a brown mare named Dust, snorted and stomped at the dry ground. The cowboy had been traveling alone for weeks, trying to find work, water, or even a sign of other settlers. Times were hard, and the frontier did not forgive weakness. His hat was tilted low, hiding tired eyes, and the leather of his coat was cracked from sun and sweat. Yet, despite all of it, Ethan carried himself with a quiet stubbornness, the kind of stubbornness that kept people alive in places like this. As he crested a low hill, Ethan noticed something unusual. A thin line of smoke rose far in the distance, far enough that it could have been a campfire or trouble. He frowned, squinting at it. Settlers didn't usually camp this far out, not without reason. And then he saw it, something tied to a tree, swaying slightly in the wind. Ethan guided Dust carefully down the slope, the mare's hooves crunching over dry stones. As he got closer, he realized the figure was a person, a woman, by the shape of her form, tied roughly to a gnarled tree. Her arms were pulled behind her, rope cutting into her wrists, and her head bowed slightly. The sight made Ethan's stomach twist. He had seen trouble before, but not like this. This felt wrong. A weathered wooden sign leaned against the tree. The words were scratched into the wood, worn and faded. "The whites call it the Black Spire. Enter at your own risk." Ethan frowned. He didn't know what the sign meant, but the warning sent a shiver through him. Still, he couldn't just ride past. "Hey there," he called, his voice low but steady. "You okay?" The woman lifted her head slowly, and Ethan caught the first glimpse of her face. Her dark eyes were sharp and full of defiance. Her hair was black and tangled, falling over her shoulders. She wore simple, rough clothing, remnants of what might have been a dress once, but it was clear she was strong despite the situation. "I'm fine," she said, her voice firm, even though she was tied to a tree. "Just leave me here." Ethan shook his head. "I don't think so." "Can't do that to someone. Who did this to you?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she studied him, eyes flicking to his boots, then the gun at his hip, then back to his face. There was something about the way she measured him, like she was deciding whether he was a threat. "Name's Nokomis," she finally said. I'm an outcast. They left me here for reasons that don't concern you." Ethan frowned. "Outcast? Where's here? And who left you tied to a tree in the middle of nowhere?" "The Black Spire," she said, jerking her chin toward the horizon. "It's a place the settlers fear. That's why they left me." Ethan glanced at the distant hill again, squinting. A strange feeling ran down his spine. He didn't know what the Black Spire was, but he could feel the warning in her words. Still, something about Nokomis made him hesitate to ride away. She wasn't weak. She had that fire in her eyes that said she could survive if she had to, but maybe she didn't have to, not if he helped. "Hold still," he said. He dismounted slowly and walked over, Dust watching him with wary eyes. He knelt down, pulling a knife from his belt. Carefully, he began to cut the rope binding her wrists. Nokomis didn't struggle. She led him, but she kept her eyes on him, cautious. When the rope finally fell away, she rubbed her wrists and flexed her fingers. "Thanks," she said quietly. "Don't thank me yet," Ethan said. "We still have to figure out where you came from, and if anyone's gonna come looking for trouble." Nokomis studied him for a long moment. "They won't. Settlers fear the Black Spire. They think it's cursed. I went there to see it. They didn't like that." "They left me? The Black Spire?" Ethan asked. "Never heard of it. Where is it?" "East of here," Nokomis said, pointing toward a distant ridge. "It's a tower, or a rock, or something. It hums, sometimes. It's not natural." Ethan felt a chill at her words. He had seen strange things on the frontier, strange rocks, strange animals, but nothing that hummed. His gut told him this was serious. "All right," he said finally. "We need to get you somewhere safe before dark. Can you walk?" "I can," she said. "If you help me down this hill first." Together they climbed down the slope, dust moving carefully alongside them. The sun dipped lower, and the shadows grew long. Ethan kept one hand on Nokomis's elbow, steadying her as they walked. The land was unforgiving, with dry thorns and jagged stones. At one point, Nokomis nearly stumbled, and Ethan caught her just in time. "You've been out here a long time?" Ethan asked, trying to make conversation. "Too long," she admitted. "I've learned to read the land. Animals, plants, even the wind. It tells me things others don't notice." Ethan nodded. That caught his attention. "You've got eyes for more than just trouble, huh?" She smirked faintly. "And you think you do?" He laughed softly. "Maybe not, but I'm learning." As they walked, Ethan realized something. Nokomis wasn't just another woman stranded in the wilderness. She was smart, alert, and brave. She had survived on her own, and that meant she had skills he didn't. That made him respect her, even as he worried for her safety. The first signs of night approached, a pale moon rising over the hills. They reached a small grove of trees where the ground was soft and water pooled in a shallow hollow. Dust drank eagerly, and Ethan wiped the sweat from his face. "Think you can keep up with me?" Ethan asked, looking at Nokomis. "I can," she said simply, her dark eyes steady. Ethan glanced at the horizon again. Somewhere out there was the Black Spire. He didn't know what awaited them, but he knew one thing. Life on this frontier was dangerous, and curiosity could be deadly. And yet there was something about Nokomis, about the way she had survived, that made him think maybe humans could face even the strangest threats if they worked together. For now, though, they had to rest. Ethan collected some dry wood and started a small fire. The flames cast flickering shadows across the grove. Nokomis sat nearby, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "You're not like the others," she said suddenly. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "The others?" "The settlers. They fear anything they don't understand. They leave people like me for dead." Ethan looked at her quietly. "Maybe. But sometimes the ones who survive aren't the strongest. They're the ones who keep going. They're the ones who think and fight and don't give up." Nokomis smiled faintly. "Then I guess we're alike in that way." The fire crackled. Dust snorted, and the wind carried the scent of dry grass and earth. Ethan felt a strange sense of calm. He didn't know what the Black Spire was, or what dangers lay ahead. But he did know one thing. He had found someone worth trusting. someone who could survive where most others would fail. And in the frontier, sometimes that was the difference between life and death. As the night deepened, Ethan and Nokomis settled near the fire. The stars blinked above them, endless and cold, yet somehow welcoming. Somewhere in the darkness the black spire awaited, silent and humming, and Ethan knew that tomorrow their journey would truly begin. For the first time in weeks, he felt hope. The next morning, the sun rose in a pale pink haze, cutting through the chill of dawn. Ethan stirred by the fire, rubbing his eyes and checking Dust, who had spent the night quietly grazing nearby. Nokomis was already awake, stretching her arms and scanning the horizon. There was a calm determination in her movements that told Ethan she had faced hardship before. "Ready to move?" he asked, gathering his pack. "Yes," Nokomis replied simply. She lifted her worn cloak over her shoulders and adjusted the small satchel at her waist. "The black spire waits, and I want to reach it before anyone else notices me." Ethan frowned. "Before anyone else notices you?"
"You mean trouble," Nokomis nodded. "Settlers fear it."
"That's why I was left. But others, mercenaries, hunters, or worse, they might come. The spire, it holds power, things humans weren't meant to find easily." Ethan's brow furrowed.
Power? Sounds dangerous.
She shrugged. "Everything dangerous is worth seeing. You'll understand when we get there." Ethan shook his head. "I've been in danger before, but danger with an unknown. Now that's a different story." Dust pawed the ground impatiently, ready to move. Ethan helped Nokomis onto her feet, and the two of them started walking east, toward the distant ridge where the black spire supposedly stood. The land stretched endlessly, rolling hills covered in tall, dry grass. Here and there, twisted trees with gnarled branches rose from the earth like warning signs. The wind carried whispers through the grass, and sometimes Ethan thought he heard faint sounds that weren't just the wind. Hours passed. Ethan kept an eye on the horizon, and Nokomis scanned the ground and sky as if reading messages only she could see. She pointed out hidden water pools and edible roots, explaining how settlers missed things that the land freely offered. "You've got sharp eyes," Ethan said. "Most people would have walked past those roots 100 times without noticing it." "I've had to survive," Nokomis said. "The land teaches you things. You only survive if you notice them." Ethan nodded, impressed. "I've survived too, but in my own way. I ride, I shoot, I move fast." "Guess we make a good team." Nokomis smiled faintly but didn't reply. She was watching the horizon again. As the sun climbed higher, the terrain grew harsher. Rocks jutted from the earth and the wind blew hotter. They came across a small, dry creek bed, littered with bones of animals that hadn't made it through the summer. Dust hesitated, sniffing the air. "Something's off," Ethan muttered. "Stay close." Nokomis nodded, her hand brushing the small knife at her waist. The knife looked simple but deadly in her grip. "Sometimes danger comes without warning," she said. "The land tests you." Ethan kept his hand near his revolver. They continued cautiously, every step measured. Then, in the distance, a low growl echoed through the rocks. Ethan froze. Dust whinnied, backing slightly. "Stay calm," Ethan whispered. "Could be wolves. Or worse." From the shadows of the rocks, a pair of glowing eyes appeared, followed by another and another. A pack of large mutated wolves emerged, their fur matted and dark, their teeth long and sharp. They circled, clearly hungry and confident. Ethan swallowed hard. Looks like they want us for breakfast. Nokomis stepped forward slightly, holding her knife low but steady. Not if we make them think twice. Ethan nodded. He grabbed a handful of stones and tossed them near the pack, hoping to scare them off. The wolves growled, but didn't retreat. Dust stomped, snorting as if warning them not to come closer. Ethan raised his revolver. We have to move fast. Follow me. They ran across the creek bed, dodging rocks and low branches. The wolves chased for a few moments, but Nokomis used her knowledge of the land. She led Ethan toward a narrow gap between rocks, a place too small for the wolves to follow. The pack skidded to a halt, growling and snarling, before retreating into the shadows. Ethan exhaled heavily. Good thinking. Nokomis didn't smile. The land teaches lessons. Remember them, or it kills you. They paused to rest, drinking from a small waterhole Nokomis had found. Ethan watched her closely. She was more than tough. She was smart, aware, and fearless in ways he admired. You've been left to die before, he said quietly, but you survived. How? Nokomis looked at him, her eyes serious. I trusted my mind, not others. Humans aren't the strongest, Ethan, but we're clever. We notice things others don't. That's why I survived, and why I'll survive the Black Spire. Ethan felt a strange warmth in his chest. It wasn't just admiration. It was respect. Humans had a way of enduring that even the toughest animals or fiercest storms couldn't match. The sun was dropping again when they reached the foot of a rocky ridge. The Black Spire loomed in the distance. It was tall and black, like a shard of night, cutting through the sky. Faint vibrations seemed to ripple through the air around it, a low hum that made the hair on Ethan's arms stand on end. So this is it, he said, awe in his voice. Wow. Some settlers say it's cursed. Some say it's alive. I say it's something humans weren't meant to find. Ethan squinted, studying the tower. It was alien, impossible. Smooth black surfaces reflected the last rays of sun, yet it seemed to absorb light as well. He could feel a strange pull in his chest, a mix of curiosity and fear. How do we get inside? Ethan asked. Ah! Nokomis shook her head. We don't. Not yet. First, we must understand it. The land tells us what is safe. The spire. It watches. It tests.
We have to be careful. They set up a small camp a safe distance from the tower.
Nokomis gathered firewood while Ethan checked their supplies. They had food for a day or two, and some water. They needed more if they were to survive the nights ahead. As darkness fell, Ethan and Nokomis sat by the fire. The spire's shadow stretched across the land, tall and silent, yet somehow alive. The hum in the air grew faintly louder as night deepened.
Do you think it's dangerous? Ethan asked.
Nokomis stared at the spire, her eyes reflecting the firelight. Everything dangerous is also powerful. Humans aren't always the strongest, but we adapt.
We think. We survive.
If we understand it, we can use it, or at least live through it. Ethan nodded slowly. He didn't fully understand, but he trusted her instincts. Something about Nokomis told him she had survived worse than this, and if anyone could guide him through the unknown, it was her. The night was quiet, except for the occasional howl of distant wolves. The fire crackled and popped. Dust lay nearby, ears twitching, sensing the tension in the air. Ethan looked at Nokomis, who seemed to be listening to the hum of the spire. Tomorrow, she said, we move closer. We observe, we learn, and we survive. Together. Ah. Ethan felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. The frontier had always been cruel, unforgiving, and lonely. But now, with Nokomis at his side, he felt that even the Black Spire, with all its mystery and danger, could be faced. The fire burned low, and the stars above were bright and endless. Somewhere in the distance, the spire waited silently, watching, testing, and Ethan knew the journey ahead would be harder than anything he had faced before, but also more important. For the first time in weeks, he felt alive. And so, under the alien sky, two humans prepared to face a mystery that would test everything about their courage, intelligence, and spirit. The Black Spire waited. The next morning, the sun barely broke over the horizon, casting long shadows across the dry, rocky ground. Ethan stretched, muscles stiff from the previous day's journey, and looked toward the distant tower. The Black Spire stood tall and silent, its black surface reflecting nothing, absorbing all light, and sending a subtle hum through the air that made his chest tighten. Nokomis was already awake, crouched near a small stream, examining the soil and water with careful precision. "Water is safe," she said, without looking up. "But the air around the spire, it feels different. Be ready." Ethan tightened the straps on his pack and checked Dust's saddle. "Different how?" "Energy," she said simply. "The spire isn't just a rock. It moves, watches, responds. Humans who rely only on strength or tools fail here. But humans who think, who notice, can survive." Ethan frowned. He had survived bandits, wolves, and the harshest of frontiers, but this felt like a test he didn't understand. He swallowed hard. "All right," he said finally. "Let's see what we're up against." They approached cautiously, moving along a narrow path between jagged rocks. The closer they got, the more Ethan felt a subtle vibration in the ground. The hum that Nokomis had warned him about grew stronger, almost like a low heartbeat. Dust snorted nervously, and Nokomis held up a hand to calm him. "Don't worry," she said. "It won't hurt us, not if we are careful." The Black Spire was taller than any building Ethan had ever seen. Its surface was smooth, black, and sharp, almost as if it had been carved by an unseen hand. Strange markings covered it, lines and shapes that seemed to glow faintly in the morning light. Ethan ran a finger over one, and the metal felt cold, alive somehow, humming beneath his touch. "This thing's alive?" Ethan asked, his voice low.
In a way, Nokomis said.
It reacts to those who touch it, but not all humans can reach it safely.
"We must think before we act." He had always relied on instinct and muscle, but now he realized he needed more than that. He needed observation, patience, and cleverness. They circled the base of the spire, looking for an entrance. There were no doors, no obvious cracks. Then Nokomis knelt and placed her hand on the ground. Ethan watched as the hum beneath their feet grew louder. A section of the spire's surface shifted subtly, like liquid black metal flowing aside. "There," Nokomis whispered. "It responds to us." Ethan stepped forward, heart pounding. Together, they entered a narrow passage that led into the heart of the spire. Darkness surrounded them, thick and absolute, but the walls pulsed with a faint glow that guided their steps. The hum became louder, almost musical, vibrating through their bones. Inside, the spire was unlike anything Ethan had ever imagined. The walls were lined with panels of black crystal that reflected their images in strange ways. Holographic symbols floated in the air, shifting and changing. The air smelled faintly metallic and alive. "Look," Nokomis said, pointing to a floating hologram. It showed a map of the surrounding land. hills, rivers, and forests, but parts of it shifted as if the spire were alive and changing its memory. The spire sees everything. It records. It tests. It reacts. Ethan felt a chill. Records, tests, reacts. How do we know we won't fail it? Nokomis smiled faintly. We survive because we think, Ethan. The spire tests brute strength, but humans succeed with cleverness, observation, and patience. Watch. She stepped forward, touching one of the floating symbols. The symbol shifted and rearranged itself, forming a new shape. A faint door opened in the far wall, barely visible. Nokomis gestured for Ethan to follow. The next room was enormous. The floor seemed to float above a deep black void, but their feet felt solid. Strange machinery hummed quietly, but it was clearly designed for intelligent beings rather than brute force. Holograms of stars and planets rotated in the air, showing positions and movements Ethan could barely comprehend. Everything here... It's a test, Nokomis said. The spire watches, waits. It gives rewards to those who think, and challenges to those who rush. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then we think. Together. They move deeper, careful to observe every shift in the spire's energy. Some symbols responded to touch, while others reacted only to proximity. Nokomis explained each subtle change as they moved, showing Ethan that observation and patience could reveal paths where brute force failed. Suddenly, the hum grew louder, and the floor beneath them shifted slightly. Panels of the walls glowed red. Ethan froze. What now? Nokomis placed a hand on his shoulder. Don't panic. The spire tests fear. It wants to see if we act recklessly. Ethan took a deep breath and studied the room. The floating symbols pulsed in patterns, and he realized something. It's a sequence, he whispered. We have to touch them in order. Nokomis nodded. Exactly. Humans can see patterns, adapt, learn. Others fail because they rely only on strength. Watch me. She moved carefully, touching the symbols in a precise sequence. The red glow receded, and a platform rose from the floor, leading to another chamber. Ethan followed, feeling both awe and nervousness. Every step they took seemed to test their intelligence and courage. The next chamber was filled with strange objects, floating orbs of light, panels that responded to thought rather than touch, and a faint holographic map of the planet. Ethan reached out to touch one orb, and it pulsed brightly before rearranging itself into a shape he recognized, a map of nearby valleys and rivers. This is incredible, he whispered. It's like the spire's teaching us. Nokomis nodded. Not teaching, testing. Only humans can pass because we adapt. We notice, we think, we survive. That is our power. As they moved deeper, the spire's tests became more subtle. A corridor shifted under their feet, forcing them to use balance and observation. Panels displayed illusions of danger. Wolves, fire, cliffs, but careful study revealed them to be holograms. They navigated them safely. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. Ethan realized that the spire wasn't just a building. It was alive in ways he couldn't fully understand. It tested patience, cleverness, teamwork, and courage. And he realized something else. Humans, though weaker than many creatures or machines, had something unique: intuition, creativity, and resilience. Finally, they reached a chamber unlike the others. It was open, vast, and the ceiling disappeared into shadows above. In the center was a glowing platform, covered with symbols and panels that pulsed gently. The hum was softer here, almost welcoming. Nokomi stepped forward and placed her hand on the platform. Light spread through the chamber, and a voice, soft, alien, and melodic, echoed in their minds. Humans, clever, curious, enduring. You have been tested. Few survive because few think beyond strength. You adapt. Ethan looked at Nokomis, eyes wide. It's speaking to us? She nodded slowly. It recognizes us. It sees our minds, our choices. That's why we survive. That's why humans endure where others fail. A panel in the center opened, revealing strange tools, devices, and knowledge beyond Ethan's understanding. Maps of stars, energy charts, and alien technology floated above it. Nokomis reached out, touching one hologram, and it responded to her thoughts, expanding into an image of distant lands and hidden resources. This is everything, Ethan whispered. All the settlers feared it, and here it is, waiting for those who can think. Nokomis smiled faintly. Exactly. Humans are not the strongest, not the fastest. But we can solve problems, adapt to unknown challenges, and survive where others cannot. That is why the spire allows us in. Ethan nodded slowly, understanding dawning. He had faced danger with guns, with horses, with grit. But this was a test of mind, courage, and teamwork. And humans, clever and adaptable, could succeed where others failed. As they left the chamber, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. The Black Spire was not just a mystery. It was a challenge, a proving ground, and a treasure trove of knowledge. And humans, working together, could rise above even the strangest threats. Outside, the sun was low, casting long shadows across the land. The spire pulsed faintly, as if acknowledging their presence. Ethan and Nokomis emerged side by side, stronger, smarter, and more confident than when they entered. We did it, Ethan said quietly. Yes, Nokomis agreed. But this is only the beginning. The spire has more tests, and others will come. We must be ready. Ethan looked toward the horizon. Humans were fragile in many ways, but in spirit, in courage, and in adaptability, they were unmatched. The frontier had tested him before, but the Black Spire had shown him something new. Humans were special, not because of strength or firepower, but because of heart, mind, and determination. And together, they would face whatever came next. The sun had barely risen when Ethan Crow stirred, pulling his coat tighter around him. The cold morning air carried the scent of dust and metal, a strange combination that made him tense. Dust pawed at the ground nearby, impatient to start moving. Nokomis was already awake, crouched at the edge of a cliff that overlooked the valley surrounding the Black Spire. Her eyes were sharp, scanning the distant horizon. They're coming, she said quietly, without turning. Ethan frowned. Who's coming? Hunters. Settlers who don't like humans challenging the spire. Mercenaries who want to take what we've found. They'll come for the tower, Nokomis said, her voice steady. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He had survived bandits and wild animals, but the thought of humans coming armed for power, human greed, made him uneasy. He checked his revolver and tightened his belt. Then we defend it. Together, Nokomis nodded.
Yes, but we must use our minds, not just guns.
The spire reacts to strength, yes, but humans survive because of cleverness, not just force. They spent the morning preparing. Nokomis set traps along the ridge paths, using rocks, pulleys, and wires she had scavenged from nearby abandoned settlements. Ethan helped, laying false trails and digging small pits that could slow down pursuers. The land itself became a tool. Hours passed, and by mid-afternoon, the first signs of trouble appeared. Dust whinnied nervously. Ethan squinted across the valley and saw movement, small clouds of dust approaching, men on horseback, armed and determined. "They're coming fast," Ethan said, his hand tightening on his revolver. Nokomis studied the horizon.
Let them. The spire is with us.
And humans will outthink them.
As the men approached, the black spire seemed to hum louder. The vibrations under Ethan's boots were steady, almost like a heartbeat. He felt the energy of the place, the test it represented, and realized that it wasn't just the intruders they had to face. They had to face the challenge with intelligence and courage. The first wave of men reached the base of the ridge. They were loud, shouting and laughing, confident in their numbers. Ethan and Nokomis remained hidden, watching carefully.
Let's give them a welcome, Nokomis whispered.
She gestured, and Ethan understood. They were about to use their surroundings and the spire itself to their advantage. The first trap was simple. Nokomis had placed loose rocks in a narrow pass. A rider's horse slipped, sending the man tumbling into a small pit Ethan had dug. The rest of the group paused, unsure of what to do next. Ethan fired a warning shot into the air. The sound echoed off the cliffs. "Move carefully," he called. "The land isn't on your side." The intruders pressed forward, trying to flank the ridge. Nokomis had anticipated this. She triggered a pulley system that dropped a net over a small path, snagging 2 horses and throwing the riders off balance. Chaos erupted among them. Ethan felt a thrill, not from violence, but from watching humans, himself and Nokomis, use brains over brute force. "They won't get the spire," he muttered. Nokomis smiled faintly. "Humans can endure, adapt, and outthink. That is why we survive. Not because we are the strongest, but because we are clever." The attackers regrouped, realizing they were facing more than just 2 humans. Ethan and Nokomis moved to a higher vantage point. From here, the spire's hum was stronger, almost guiding them. The walls of the tower pulsed slightly, as if aware of the situation. Down, down, down. "Look," Nokomis said, pointing to faint lights on the spire's surface. "It can help us. It responds to humans who think, who notice. Use it." Ethan understood. He pressed his palm against the black wall of the spire. A wave of energy pulsed through him, and the rock shifted, creating a shadowed passage that hid their flank. The attackers faltered, unable to see Ethan and Nokomis anymore. "Keep calm," Nokomis whispered. "The spire watches, the land protects, and humans endure." Using the terrain and the spire's subtle assistance, they continued their defense. Ethan lured some of the intruders toward narrow cliffs where their horses stumbled over hidden rocks and traps. Nokomis guided him silently, whispering advice, her knowledge of the land unmatched. One man tried to sneak behind them, hoping to catch them off guard. Nokomis spotted him immediately, her sharp eyes catching the glint of a knife in the sunlight. "Left," she called, pointing to a hidden pit. The man stepped forward and fell into a trap, screaming as he struggled. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Clever girl." Nokomis shrugged. "Clever, yes, but human." The attackers began to panic. They were not prepared for someone who could anticipate their every move. They shouted and waved their arms, trying to regroup, but every attempt was countered by traps, careful strategy, and the spire itself. Hours passed, and the sun dipped low. The attackers finally began to retreat, their morale broken, their horses exhausted. Ethan and Nokomis remained on the ridge, watching as the last of them disappeared over the horizon. Ethan exhaled, relief flooding him. "We did it." Nokomis nodded, but her eyes remained on the spire. "It was more than us," she said. "The spire helped. It recognizes humans who think, humans who adapt. Others fail because they rely on force. But we survive." Ethan looked at her, realizing the truth in her words. Humans were fragile, yes. They could be overpowered, outnumbered, or outmatched, but they had something no one else had: creativity, cunning, and the ability to learn and adapt. That was why they endured where others failed. The night settled over the black spire, calm once more. Ethan and Nokomis sat near their small fire, exhausted but unbroken. Dust lay nearby, ears twitching, sensing the quiet after chaos. "You know," Ethan said quietly, "I've fought bandits, wolves, even the harshest storms. But today felt different. We didn't just fight. We fought, we planned, we adapted. That felt powerful." Nokomis smiled faintly. "That is the human way. We are not the strongest, not the fastest, but we endure. We survive. That is why we are special, and that is why the spire accepted us." Ethan nodded. "Then I guess we make a good team." "Yes," Nokomis agreed. "A team of humans, clever and enduring. Together, we can face anything."
As the stars appeared overhead, the black spire hummed softly, almost approvingly.
Ethan felt a strange sense of peace. They had defended it not with force alone, but with intelligence, strategy, and courage. They had proven the value of human ingenuity, and the frontier had shown them yet again that humans could rise above even the strangest and deadliest challenges. Tomorrow, they would explore the spire further, uncovering more secrets and preparing for whatever threats the world or others might throw at them. For now, though, they rested, knowing that the true strength of humans lay not in guns or muscle, but in heart, mind, and spirit. And together, they were unstoppable.